everyone, welcome to this evening's live chat. Sorry for the delay, there was a few technical difficulties as always with things like this. You'll have to bear with me as well. This is only my second time doing a live. Luckily you went with me yesterday because that would have been my first, so well done. Welcome very much, and I'm really excited to talk for the next 45 minutes to an hour. It'll be about my journey as a photographer through surf photography and also into expedition, wildlife and adventure. So hopefully you can see my screen, and if you bear with me 1 second, here we go. Right, here we go. Sorry, there we go. So, well, first of all, my name's Lucia Griggi, and I'm an adventure and wildlife photographer and also a Canon Ambassador. So this evening we'll be discussing our ever-changing world over the last 2 decades through my eyes as a photographer, from shooting underwater in some of the world's biggest waves and some of the most amazing places in our oceans, also in my later career, exploring through our last frontiers, circumnavigating the Arctic and the Antarctic regions, and really just sort of immersing myself in documenting our ever-changing landscapes and wildlife. So, a little overview, just to start off here. Sorry, 2 seconds. There we go. I've lost my toolbar now. There we go. Lesson learned. Right. So overview. So we're going to start off a little bit about my life as a photographer, growing up and my early days of photography and how I really got into it. I also will then go into my surfing career and how I started off as a surf photographer and traveling the world with the World Surfing Tour. And then we'll sort of touch on a little bit of more the mainstream photography that I worked in, being based in LA in California, working with agents as more of a commercial photographer, which was, you know, quite different from being on the world tour of surfing and working in a very relaxed environment. Then we'll talk about my transition into film, so working with the moving image, coming from photography, which actually is sort of a progression that a lot of, you know, photographers can take, and with my return back into the UK. And then we'll go into current day, which is what I'm doing now, and that's exploring some of our, you know, most remote landscapes and wild places on the planet. And then a little bit about sort of the future and where I'm going, and, you know, what photography means to me, and just, you know, how photography connects us and the responsibilities we have with that. So this is a picture of me actually under the water in Fiji. It is taken by a friend of mine who also is an amazing surf photographer, and we swam out together. So it's nice to have, you know, a picture of myself actually at work. So where it all started, I had a passion for surfing at quite an early age. I actually grew up in between London and Venice in Italy, so I was very landlocked. I didn't study photography really. I was always into swimming and music, and I actually went to college and I ended up doing an A-level in photography, and that was only because I unfortunately wasn't good enough at doing any art. So they said, oh, why don't you try photography? You know, we could take you on for that. You don't need any pre-qualifications. I said, okay, that would be great. And my dad had an old camera, so I took that and, you know, spent 2 years, you know, learning photography. Unfortunately, I failed it and I got an F, which is quite funny now. I think about that and look back that I'm, you know, a full-time working photographer. However, I failed my studies at it. And I actually ended up doing a biology degree, so something completely different to what I'm doing now. So that was my journey. Then really surfing came about because I ended up, when I finished university, I ended up traveling down to Cornwall, and I really started getting into surfing. I was surf instructing and working as a local beach lifeguard. I was really fascinated by, the water. I had been a competitive swimmer for so long and had spent so much time in water. Surfing almost seemed quite natural to me, although I had this underlying fear of the ocean. And when I was young, I always used to wear these jelly shoes because I didn't want to touch the bottom, or the darkness scared me. So I don't really know how that didn't stop me, but I just loved being out in the water, and it was a really nice lifestyle. So I taught myself how to surf, and I started surfing, and in the winters I'd travel to Morocco, and in the summers I would teach in Cornwall. And then really I just, I thought, well, I'm traveling quite a lot, and I'm working, temporary here and there, and I felt like I needed a purpose when I was traveling. So I had my dad's camera with me, and I remember taking some early day photos in Morocco, and I didn't really think much of it. But then I just loved surfing so much that I decided actually it was really cool to just document my life and what I was doing and my surfing. And before I knew it, I started to have some people from, local magazines and some of my local newspapers and with local surf events saying, well, if you've got any pictures, please send them to us. We would love to see them. So I did. And I still remember my first published image. I think it was 2007. It was probably about this big in the back of a surf magazine. And I was so proud. Probably got paid about £5 for it, if that. But it really wasn't about that. And really since then, I just decided, not consciously, but my camera was just part of me, and it just came around everywhere. So I was getting published a little bit through, press and through magazines, but nothing major. And then really, as I was starting to concentrate on the UK surfing tour, I decided to drive over to Europe one summer, and I met the right people, and I wanted to, shoot the likes of Kelly Slater and Mick Fanning and all these athletes and famous personalities, and really sort of step it up a level and work in sort of the larger scope of the surfing world. And, after putting some time and hard work in and just the usual grind of, being around these people and making relationships with the surfers, I ended up working on the world tour of surfing for about, a decade really. And I was traveling all around the world, to Tahiti, to South Africa, spending winters in Hawaii, and, really just growing as not just a photographer, but as a person and my style. It was an interesting beginning of my career because I was one of the very few females. So it was very male dominated, and it was quite unusual, shall we say, for a female to sort of be swimming out at these big waves, or, being on the beach with a big, 600mm lens. And there's quite a few times where I must say I did feel quite out of place. And it was really my strong swimming ability that pushed me through being a water photographer, because without that preconditioning and the amount of strength I had as a female, which, at the time it really sort of matched the guys. I mean, I was a strong swimmer, so I could get out in the waves and handle my camera. I ended up becoming, part of the furniture quite quickly. And really within a few years, I was out there swimming in some of these big waves, whether I was in the water or, on the back of a jet ski or on the boats in the channels, and capturing, this magnificent and amazing, this diverse, world that I feel so fortunate to have experienced. Now, this is a picture I took at Cloudbreak in Fiji. It was a really memorable day. It was actually one of the tour stops on the world tour of surfing, and all the surfers were out there, and we were on the boats, and we heard that the swell, the waves were going to be picking up, and they were going to get larger. And that evening, as you can see, the swell just picked up, and the waves just became absolutely massive. So this was a very historic swell, and has stayed that way for many, many years. It was one of the biggest swells that we ever experienced. So this photo was actually taken on the back of a jet ski. I was sitting in the channel, and I believe I was shooting my Canon 1DX Mark III, and that would have had the 70 to 200 EF 2.8 lens on. And that is my perfect setup for shooting surfing. It's lightweight, I could handhold it. It was in a housing, and it gave me this shot, which got published quite a lot, really, in the surfing world. This is a photo that was also from the same place. It's really nice because you can really see the energy that's coming over the lip, the top of the wave there, with the surfer coming towards us. And again, the water clarity was beautiful. Really crisp shot. Again, I would have been shooting on my 1DX Mark III, and it was one of my best shots that again got published around that period. So another memorable time in my surfing career was Pipeline, and some of you that are logging on, and I hope there's some avid surfers, some great surfers, some surf photographers that have joined and are interested in this. So please feel free to comment in the comments and ask me questions as we go along. I have them on my screen over here, so I can see you all. So please just comment whenever you like. But this is really significant because this was a big moment for me. It was in Hawaii. Pipeline is it's a notorious wave. It's one of the most dangerous waves in the world, purely because it's an expert wave. It breaks on a really, really shallow reef, and the reef is very cavernous. So if you fall off the wave, or if you're trying to get out to the back of the wave to surf, there's underwater caves where you really have to go below sea level to allow the wave to pass. And when you're swimming it, you don't have that elevation to really see these other big sets coming in and big waves. So it's quite a technical wave, not just to surf, but also to swim as a surf photographer. I was, one of the very few, if only, female surf photographers that, was swimming out there at the time. And, it was quite daunting. And I remember my first swim, because I had assessed it quite a lot and sort of wondered how I get out there, because you can't just swim out into this wave. There's a process which works that will allow you to get out past the waves as tall as hotels crashing in front of you. And I had someone that I was working with at the time. We were on a clothing campaign, and I saw him with his camera, and he was going to swim out, and he was part of the furniture really in Hawaii as a Hawaiian surf photographer, and a very established one. And I really wasn't really at the time. I was just getting into it with swimming in Hawaii. And he said, "Oh, are you coming out today?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure where to swim from." And he goes, "Well, come with me." So I think he kind of pretended that he didn't really know me, because he was probably embarrassed that I was going to swim with him. But I did anyway. And when he said go, he said, "Just go, just swim out there." So I did, and I swam. And he said, "I've never seen anyone swim so fast." I mean, by the time he'd even got halfway out to the wave, I was already out the back. I had swum so fast. And I think, that kind of broke the ice with all these guys, that they realized that I could hold my own out there. So that was the first season. The second season I came back. So I started to swim it. It's such a beautiful wave, the symmetry, the light. This photo was actually taken on my Canon 5D Mark IV, which is a perfect setup for in the water. It's robust. It allows me to capture a beautiful image. The dynamic range on it is amazing. I can get that low light in the background. I've slowed that shutter down so you can see the wave and the white water that's sort of drifting and dreamy sort of on top. And then you can really see that color of the green just in the back of the wave there. And I was using an 85mm lens, my Canon 85 1.8, which I wouldn't normally use. I normally use a 1.2, but for in the water, the 1.8 lens is absolutely perfect. It's much lighter. It's a slightly faster lens when it comes to picking up movement. So that worked really, really well with me. And it's also a really affordable lens. So a little bit of advice is, if you are getting into surf photography or you're doing surf photography, is, you don't need the most expensive kit to get an amazing image. An 85mm from Canon is, I believe, 300-400. I'm sure Campkins cameras can probably help me out here, but it's not an L series. It's not a Pro, and I get in the water and I use it, and it's given me some amazing published images. So I definitely recommend it. So that's pipeline. So moving on. So one part of surfing that really, really helped me grow my career, shall we say, is press coverage. And I was really fortunate that, because I'd sort of found a niche in my photography, not just in the genre of surfing, which is obviously still quite a small, unique field, but I was also a female. And, as I said before, females weren't in the water swimming out in big waves. Females weren't on the beach carrying their 600-800mm lens. They were on the beach in their bikinis. And I wasn't. And looking back then, and even just female surfers in the water, I remember growing up in Cornwall surfing, and there was about 5 of us. And, you look nowadays and there's so many more women that are out there riding the waves amongst all the guys. And the same with surf photography. There's, so many more women that are out there and just battling this out. And it's just really, really great to see that. But something that helped me back then, which I didn't really realize was helping me and, growing my career, was I was getting a lot of coverage. So, some of the magazines would come to me and say, we're really interested in your story. What's it like to swim out a pipeline? Or, how do you get these images amongst the water? And is it dangerous? Or it's, what's your lifestyle like? So, that really helped me, and it sort of gave me exposure. So that's also a good point if you are looking to get into professional photography, coming maybe from a hobby. Think of something that's different. Think of something that's a niche that makes you stand out. And it doesn't have to be if you're a female or a male. It's just find your own path. Find something which makes you stand out and that you genuinely have a passion for. Because if you have that passion and you have that focus, then you will get to where you would like to get to. So in my surfing career, I wasn't just focused on, getting the action photos and the surfers. I was really, captured. It really interested me what was on land, as well as being in these remote places with these waves. And because surfing took me to so many remote places where I, may not have ever had the knowledge to go, I really wanted to capture with my camera and sort of get into a more photojournalist style of the cultures and the people. And these are some press cuttings or magazine cuttings of when I was shooting some surfing in Fiji, and I ended up living on an island for a month as we were shooting this wave, which was about 40 miles out to sea. I mean, there was nothing close to it whatsoever, and there were these firewalkers and these tribes that lived on the island that fished and had such a different way of life, which at the time I had never really been exposed to. So it was so interesting. And I remember actually getting really ill, and I think I got bronchitis at the time, and I was swimming some of these waves which weren't the easiest, and they were gonna go and send for a doctor and see if they could bring me some antibiotics. And actually I had walked over to the other side of the island where this tribe was, and one of the men said, or not said, sort of in body language, because obviously we didn't speak the same language, he said something about going to find something. So the next day he came back, and I was in this sort of shack and just sort of lying in this bed feeling very sorry for myself, and he came back with all these leaves and put it into a tea. And it was some kind of drink that he had picked. Apparently he'd been out picking all these leaves all day the day before, and I drank this tea, and the next day it had gone. I was perfectly healthy. I could breathe again. My asthma had gone. It was amazing. And it was just this interaction and feeling so blessed that I could live this life with people that, I would never have really gone out to pursue or to capture if it wasn't for surfing. So I like to document that. I wrote a little bit too. I'm not the best writer, but I really liked expressing myself that way. And for editorial clients too, sometimes if you can offer the words as well as the photos, they can really gravitate to you. So anyone that's really interested in editorial photography and focusing on a genre, but to capture the essence of what that is, then it's really good to be able to do both the words and the photos. Another pinnacle point in my career was when I actually took the shot. Again, it was in Fiji. It's a little Fiji heavy here, and it wasn't a particularly well published shot or photograph in the sense that the surfer was well known. So it wasn't a picture of Kelly Slater, and it wasn't being traveled around the surf mags and published. So I ended up entering it into a competition which I'd never entered photography award before or really thought about it. And something had popped up in my inbox one morning, and I thought, oh, why not? I might enter something. A few weeks later, or maybe it was a few months later, but I got a notification saying that I had won an award from National Geographic, which was the one I had entered, and it had won. And it really gave me so much exposure, and it was quite a controversial shot because everyone, it got so much attention. People were saying, well, but it's not real. It must have been photoshopped. Why is the surfer's hair so dry? And how are these colors like this? And it was quite a funny time, really, because I had never been used to anyone sort of, or very highbrow clients seeing much of my work outside the surf industry, and it got the attention of brands such as Jeep and other commercial brands, where it was at a time that surfing was becoming noticed to more mainstream media. So people were contacting me to license the photo to put on their brochures, on their billboards. And it was a real learning experience for me because I had never been educated or learned about the business of photography, or how do I sell images, how do I copyright them. So I really learned as I went along the way. But yes, this photo was, a real turning point in my career. And it really sort of pushed me into a commercial side as a freelance photographer. This photo, quickly, it was taken again with my Canon 5D Mark IV, and this was taken with the Canon 15mm 2.8, which I absolutely love that lens, but unfortunately we don't have that anymore. And I'm actually going out to Greece next week, and I'm going to be taking their 14mm prime, and I'm excited to try that one out. So again, just going on a little bit more about sort of my commercial work and where, life is taking me now with photography. And this was, as I was traveling and doing these editorial features and, in among the waves and working with these athletes, I was picking up work from the likes of Rip Curl and Billabong, and they were, they realized I could do fashion and portraiture. So I was quite diverse. So it worked well because there was a lot of financial gain in it, because it was commercial, and I was learning how to, work as a photographer and understand, budgeting and invoicing and all the beautiful stuff that comes around pro photography that we have to learn. And it really taught me, how to direct more and how to grow as a photographer. I also went into, doing more commercial work for mainstream editorial. I was based in California at the time. So I was doing campaigns for tourism boards. I was shooting food. I mean, who would have thought? I was also doing book publishing. So I worked on many books over that time, really pushing and working with publishing houses in the States for women that surfed. And one of my most recent books was documenting, 15 women that surfed at the top level and their stories. Another book that I worked with a famous surf author on the skateboard book, which was documenting the history of the skateboard, all the way from the Dogtown era up until, at the time, Danny Way and some of the, the more new school people. So, I was sort of taking on a lot at the time, but it was allowing me to really follow my passion of surf and skate and really freedom, because I think that's the thing I've always cherished, is having the freedom to enjoy life and to live it to the full. I was also being pushed more into, I guess, commercial in a way that, this is an editorial feature on Yvon Chouinard, and it was, I had to go to his house, and it was, building a story about, how he started Patagonia, his fly fishing passion. His wife was making me English tea, which she, really took pride in. Not a massive tea fan, but I didn't tell her that. And, seeing these published and pushing myself to understand lighting and having the confidence to approach people and do portraits and really make my work diverse. Then really sort of after that, and that was at a time where I also had picked up an agent. So I had an agent working with me. I was working on a lot of commercial shoots, and because it pushed me, I also sort of progressed more into film and wanted to explore directing. And one of my first films that I directed was a Mad Max trailer for a gaming commercial, and we were shooting that out in the California salt plains. And it was for Warner Brothers, and we had all the clients there. So I learned a lot, being pushed into something which I definitely wasn't ready for at the time. It all turned out great. And I think it's quite a natural progression as a photographer, if you want to get into the moving image, to direct. Because I think as photographers, we naturally direct. We naturally have to pull our subjects in. We naturally have to be forthcoming to really, achieve the shots and the photographs that we want. So I found it quite natural, and I really enjoyed doing it and learning something new. I went on to do some surf documentaries, which at the time I wasn't filming for or directing. I was working as the still photographer. Again, there's many different faces of working in film, from doing the stills on set, from directing, from being a camera op. And, for me, I like doing anything from the stills to doing time lapse, and time lapse is a great way to move your still work, your photography, into the moving image, into film. And being able to self shoot on DSLRs, I mean, that was such a game changer. I would never have probably got into filming if I had to learn how to use a big broadcast camera, or I still wouldn't really know how to get my hands on that. So being able to, I think it was the Canon 5D Mark III or IV that I started looking at filming, because Canon gave me the opportunity to be able to very easily have my hands on something where I could take pictures and then flick a button and then move into the stills and see that frame the same, but understand how to make it also different. And now we've got the mirrorless cameras. So we've got the R6, the Canon R6, the Canon R5. I was really fortunate in Scotland recently on a shoot to have the R6, and absolutely fantastic. I mean, the ease of being able to be a photographer, switch that over to filming, was just superb. The quality was great. There was nothing compromised on it. And the same with the R5, which is one of Canon's newest mirrorless cameras that have come out, and the filming capacities on that is absolutely mind-blowing too. So moving on from film, I'm now going to sort of move into more about my current day work, and I'm going to play a short video where I spend most of my time now. So over to you, Chris. So coming back from surfing and doing my commercial work, I felt like my life was so fast paced and I was traveling all the time, and surfing is always going to be a part of me and it's always a part of who I am. But I felt like I needed to push into something slightly different. And my life took a turn, and I ended up having an opportunity about 4 or 5 years ago where I met a marine biologist, and she worked out to sea on some vessels doing some research with killer whales. And she said, oh, we're looking for a filmmaker who's working in expedition. And so I ended up that year having my first job working on an expedition vessel that was going to Siberia and Russia, the Russian Far East. And off I went, and I had never really shot much wildlife before. I mean, I'd been to Africa 3 times and enjoyed the wilderness, but not as I was yet to see what that would be. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, in the Russian Far East, it's so affluent of wildlife. And, I was traveling through Russia and Japan. I was in the Kuril Islands, which are these remote islands, which, have calderas. And it was just a whole new world for me. And, it really, really took me by surprise. I absolutely loved, being in this environment. In 2017, I ended up spending 3 months in Antarctica, where I was documenting the landscape and travel around that. I was spending summers in the Arctic. In 2019, I did some expeditions and went through the Northeast Passage, which is basically Arctic Russia. I was down in the Darien jungle, and that's the where Colombia and Panama join. And that's where this photo was taken. It was it's a very remote part. It's a little bit dangerous because there's a lot of drug trafficking and the road doesn't join, so it's quite a sensitive area. And I remember we came in on in the mangroves in canoes, and I remember having all my my equipment there, and we were greeted by this tribe, and that it was so beautiful. It was so quiet and tranquil, and then you just suddenly get immersed with this culture that's so bare, so stripped back to what we're used to in our society here. And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming because, as a photographer, I'm, being welcomed into these places, and you really have to gain a level of trust with these people to be able to take their portraits, for them really to give you the portrait. Maybe some of you that have joined us this evening are really interested in portraits. You take portraits of your children, your family, travel portraits when you're on holiday, and it's so rewarding being able to capture the cultures that you go and visit. It's memories. You're capturing memories where you can look back and really sort of remember that moment, and that's what photography is to me. Whether I sell my images or I don't, or some make it, some don't, this image for me was so special because this girl was the first girl that I sort of acknowledged, or that she acknowledged me, and she just kept staring at me, and she was trying to work me out, and I was trying to think, oh Lord, how do I shoot this? And it was quite overwhelming with so many other people around from the tribes. And I remember just sort of touching my face and sort of doing this, and she copied me, and that was the shot for me. That was the shot I needed. And I think a lot of this is all about body language and making these people feeling at ease, and that's really when the true magic happens. This photo was taken, I believe, on my Canon 1D X Mark III, and that would have been with my Canon 85mm 1.2. So one of my favorite portrait lenses is the Canon 85 1.2. It's got a very cinematic look. It is an L series lens, so it is at a higher price point. And it's the alternate to the surf lens, which I discussed earlier, which was my 1.8. This gives the differences, if anyone's interested, is this gives a much softer, more cinematic look. So the depth of field is shallower, and it really allows for the eyes to pop out and the features to really be defined. So it's one of my favorite lenses that I travel with a lot. So this was an image from South Georgia, actually, and this was some time I spent there working with the elephant seals, and these are king penguins, and this is Gold Harbour. It's an amazing place. It's so alive with wildlife. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's like a crowded festival for animals, and they're all going about their day. They're all going about, every moment they need to do to survive. And I was kind of trying to work out how I could maybe sort of separate this or build a narrative through it. And I got really lucky that these two king penguins kind of walked up around the fringe of the ocean there in the bay, and it kind of just worked out, so I could really pull them out from the rest. So that was, I believe that was taken on my Canon 1DX Mark III, and that would have been with my Canon 24mm 1.4. I really like my prime lenses. I find when I work with Canon primes, which might be seen as a little unusual when it comes to travel, because a lot of people like diversity and being able to respond quickly. So zoom lenses are sometimes the preferred. But for me, I like to simplify my eye. I like to simplify my work. I like to stay with what I've been given, and it focuses me in a way where it makes me more relaxed. So I know that's my frame. I know I will need to move around to fit what I need to do in that frame. And it just keeps me calm, and it never fails. I always get something that I'm really happy with. This is another photo that I took when I was in Antarctica. So a lot of the time when I'm in Antarctica, I'm out to sea on a vessel, and I'm exploring a lot of the passages and the vistas that, when we're traveling from place to place. And one of my favorite times was actually this evening, and it's quite exhausting. It's definitely not as glamorous as one thinks doing what I do. I mean, it's long hours. This would have been at probably 1 a.m, when you've got a window of time about 12 p.m. to about 3 a.m. where you get that golden light, and it's just magical. It's the midnight sun that never goes down. And part of how I like to work, and part of how I see my shots, is I add light. So I like to, start with a dark canvas, and then when these accents of light come in, that's when I start drawing my palette. So, I'm standing on the deck, and I'm waiting for these opportunities where the light is sort of bouncing off different, lines in my landscapes, and sort of providing me with more strip lighting. And this is, an image which you can clearly see that on. You can see how the light sort of defines and picks out small parts of the contours of the landscape, rather than if that was just fully lit, it wouldn't draw your eye to certain places. So that's quite a good tip in landscape photography, is, really use your light, really think about adding light or taking away light. Not the whole frame needs to be lit, and even if it's low lighting, which is some of the best lighting to shoot landscapes in, it's always nice to push it that little bit further and get that side or back lighting, or something which brings certain aspects out. This photo would have been shot on my Canon 5DS. So I do carry a 5DS because I like to use that for aerials. And I also like to use that for landscapes, especially if I would like the option to crop in a little bit later on post, if I just need to redefine that frame. I don't do much post-processing. I only pull out what's already there and add a little contrast, bring out the colors that are there. And if I need to crop in a little bit just to make sure my frame is perfect, then I will do. And the Canon 5DS allows me to do that with having larger megapixels and more of them. This is going up into the Arctic now, and sort of this is getting more into some of my recent work over the last few years, where I've spent a lot of time up in Arctic Russia, soon over into Arctic Canada. And the Arctic Russia, which was an expedition I did called the Northeast Passage, it's leaving Alaska in Nome and traveling up into the remote islands of Wrangel Island, which has the most density of polar bears. It's a very, very highly protected island where they have researchers on the island that monitor the polar bears and live there over the summers, going over the top of Russia and seeing these remote cultures and sort of outcrops of land with almost people that have just been, I don't know if abandoned is the right word, but just kind of left. You know, they live very simply. They fish, they live off the land. They, you know, use reindeer skins to cover their heating up, their heating pipes to be able to gain some kind of hot water. And it's really interesting. And, you know, a lot of the Arctic is ice. So, you know, we had a Russian icebreaker that, you know, cut through a lot of the sea ice, and that's where these polar bears live. So most of the time you can find them. And this is a mother and her cub. And we were passing by. We're not too close. This is taken with my Canon 300mm 2.8 prime. So this is one of my most favorite lenses. This is because I can handhold it. So it's a really diverse lens. I can shoot fashion on it. I can shoot wildlife, landscape. I don't need any support for it. So I don't need any tripods, monopods. So I can handhold it, and it's the sharpest lens I believe Canon to have ever made. For me, it's my Bible lens, and it never fails me. So this would have been taken with that. So I still quite a bit of distance away from them, but they can really sense you. So they can, you know, smell you from miles off. So that's sort of what you're seeing here is there's an acknowledgement, but at the same time, they're not feeling disturbed or threatened. This is actually the icebreaker that was cutting through the ice. And this was taken from a drone. So we could capture the environment. And as you can see, a lot of the ice here had already melted. And, you know, every year I go back into the Arctic, whether it's on the Northeast Passage or, you know, going up into Svalbard or anywhere sort of circumnavigating those areas, it's astonishing to see how the landscapes and environments are changing at the same time of year. So, you know, on this expedition, we didn't expect there to be, you know, open ice where actually, you know, the icebreaker here was expecting to cut through, you know, really solid ice, which, you know, as you can see here, it's already quite broken up. Now, you know, this was, you know, good for us, obviously, because we had a much smoother ride. But, you know, where the polar bears thrive and their inhabitants is living on this ice. They hunt on the ice. So, you know, they're hunting for the walrus. They're getting, you know, their prey there. And there seems to be less and less of them as you travel through, because there is no more, you know, there is limited ice for them to exist on. And that's also the same really with the glaciers. I've spent a lot of time, and it's one of my favorite places in Alaska. And, you know, there's glaciers everywhere, whether it's up in Alaska, it's down in Antarctica. And, you know, it's an amazing thing to be able to sit there and document the carving of some of the glacier walls that come down. But again, every year I go, you know, I can see how much our world changes by. I was in Iceland a few weeks ago, and we couldn't land on the glacier because it was too unstable. It retreated so much that, you know, the same time of year, the same glacier, it just wasn't possible. And it's a strange feeling, because I feel very privileged to be able to go to these places. And as a photographer, you know, that is my voice. So I need to be able to not just capture the shot to bring home for my clients, who I'm working with, but also it's the responsibility of doing that and capturing a shot which potentially could be the last shot of that place, of that glacier, of that polar bear on the ice that humanity might see for a long while. So there's a lot of different levels to myself being in these areas and being able to see and experience firsthand how our world is changing. And it's the same with the polar bears. You know, a lot of the time now I see them nearer cities, near Russian cities, you know, at the beginning of these passages, because they're not going out with the sea ice to be able to live. They're actually seen swimming in ocean water for days to get back to the shores of a built-up city to be able to, you know, attract and be able to eat human food and come and scavenge. And it's quite eye-opening to see that, because it's one thing hearing about it, but then having the choice, or which we might not have soon, to be able to shoot the polar bears on the ice, as you saw the picture before, to seeing a polar bear very underweight and walking the shores of a beach with no ice, looking for some sort of, you know, food product from a human. As you can imagine and appreciate photography, it's quite a distressing. It's quite distressing in seeing the difference there. So I'm gonna get Chris to play a small film about the glaciers so you can see some of the beauty of the world. We still have so many, and we still have a chance to really protect these. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind. So what does it actually consist of, exploring our last frontiers? Well, a lot of time is spent on a boat, going through these remote places, and I work very closely with you know, the officers and captains, and looking at the charts, and it's really interesting to see, you know, where we're traveling to and where, you know, the glaciers are, or the icebergs, and like I said, it's always ever changing. And you know, to be in these places where you can see, you know, the walrus and the polar bear, and, you know, down in Antarctica when you're coming into colonies of, you know, all the different species of penguins, and seeing leopard seals and the circle of life, it's something that I've become very relaxed with. I've started to feel very comfortable in these areas and more with wildlife than I probably do with people. And I think with photography and, you know, my span of my career, and, you know, as you may agree or see from this talk, is I've, you know, been quite diverse in my journey, and from never studying photography to using the camera to document my travels and my passions because I needed a purpose, because, you know, as an artistic person, that was my medium to express myself. And now sort of using that tool and my camera as I've taught myself, using this now, you know, to really bring awareness of our ever-changing world, and how we can really take steps to be mindful and make those small steps in protecting it at a time which is, you know, really important for us all. So like I said before, I mean, I feel a lot of responsibility sometimes when I'm in these remote locations. It's you know, there's been certain circumstances where it's quite overwhelming going down to colonies of penguins where it takes weeks to get there. It's minus degrees. There's a lot that goes around actually supporting yourself in getting these shots, which I'll go into after this, just to give you some indications of what to pack and kit. But I really do feel a responsibility when I'm there and I have all this wildlife in front of me. The one shot I take that I can bring home, which is that shot, which to me tells that narrative, tells that story, which I can then come back and present to society, that's that moment which has the power to influence change and to really showcase the beauty we have and how we mustn't lose that. So I thought this was quite an interesting composition. On the left here, you have a Siberian girl. It was in a really remote town where they survived on sort of making trinkets, carving, and sort of little wooden things. And it was one of the most remote places I've ever been to, and it was quite a strange place. And this girl, again, she didn't speak English, and she was beautiful, lovely blue eyes, and she seemed very angelic, and she was really interested in me and the camera. And I stood her in front of a blue wall and got this portrait, which I've really enjoyed. This would have been taken on my Canon 5D Mark IV, and that would have been again with my Canon 1.2 85mm. So again, a great lens to really accentuate the sharpness in eyes and features. And then on the right, you're sort of going into wildlife, where this was taken with my Canon 1DX Mark III, and it would have been taken with my Canon 800mm. So I had a telephoto with me, and this was a juvenile bald eagle. And this was up in the Aleutian Islands when I was exploring over to Russia. And, I don't often work with a telephoto lens at 800. My go-to is always my Canon 300 2.8, or most recently, which is also a fabulous lens, especially the most recent model that Canon's brought out, is the 400mm 2.8. It is amazingly sharp. It is so light. It's actually the same, if not lighter, than my 300, and I can handhold it. So for quick moments when I need to quickly grab it, or I'm on a Zodiac or a rib, I can also handheld. I can handhold the 400. So that also is really good. That's the Canon 400mm 2.8, their newest model. So check that out. I'm sure Campkins can help with that. This is a juvenile Weddell seal. It was actually quite an interesting story. I captured this in Antarctica on the peninsula just before a leopard seal actually took a strike. Adorable little thing, but I don't know if he quite gathered the fact there was a huge leopard seal just on the ice sunbaking, and he was very inquisitive. And I wasn't sure whether to go wide and get the whole scene in, which I did later. And don't worry, the Weddell seal survived. His curiosity did not kill him this time. But I really wanted to get that silkiness of the detail of his skin, and the ice trinkles that had kind of formed on top of his face as he had broken through the ice, and his whiskers. And something that's really nice working with telephoto lenses is getting that detail, especially with the 2.8s. And so this would have been with my Canon 300 2.8, and I would have been hand holding that from the Zodiac or rib that I was sort of cruising past. So a little bit about how I do what I do. And I always find this quite interesting for people just to have a little look behind the scenes. So please, if you've got any questions, feel free to write in the comment box so I can get back to you on that. But this is a setup which looks a little disorganized, but at the time there was some organization in it. And this was down in Antarctica shooting some of the penguin colonies, and it was an all-nighter. And it was about 12 hours of shooting in probably what would have been -20 plus, and it was absolutely freezing. So I kind of, arrive at these places. I'll make a base. This is on sea ice, so I had highly trained ice guides with me, climbers, ice pickers. So I had a team of people to keep me safe, and I had quite a big setup with me. I had my Canon bodies. So I would have had my 1DX Mark III, my 5DS, my 5D Mark IV, probably had 2 of them, maybe 2 1D bodies. And then I would have had my 300 2.8. I would have had my 800 f4, I believe it is, and my new 400 2.8, which is a super lightweight telephoto lens that Canon brought out fairly recently. I've also got a wide angle lens there. I travel a lot with my Canon 16 to 35mm 2.8. It's also an L series lens. Highly recommend it. It is diverse, and it's sort of one of the only, apart from the Canon 7200 2.8 lens, that I would use as a zoom lens. And I've got a monopod there. I think I had a Mexican burrito, a flask of hot tea, and some water. And I just kind of set camp, and I will just be sort of doing a process of elimination. As you can see, there was more than one penguin in front of me, and trying to figure out which penguin to shoot first, or even understand how to shoot it, was going to take me a little while. The light was okay. It was a little flat. It wasn't great. You don't really have much choice when you travel weeks down to some of the most remote places, so you just crack on and get on with it. But, you know, one tip about wildlife, which is something I've worked through, is, again, it's a bit like light and landscapes. You can apply the same concept. So it's about eliminating, so taking away from the frame and isolating a subject to reinvent that story. So for me, there wasn't much point in using my 16 to 35 to produce a wide angle shot of what looked like thumbnail black and white spots in the distance. There wasn't enough foreground detail. The sky was blown out. It was too washed. So there was no detail. So I knew the detail and the shot was in using a telephoto and really getting up to the characters of these emperor penguins. This is some pictures behind the scenes of how I work. So we access some of these places by skidoos. Travel a little bit heavy, so I have a cart on the back. As you can see, some pelican cases. Pelican cases are amazing to use in these destinations. They're bomb-proof. They keep the temperature at bay, and it just protects your gear, and that's something that's really important. I also use f-stop backpacks. They're amazing for adventure, and they just hold all my gear really well and protect that. As you can see here, I've got my setup, so the same lenses and cameras, and I'm smiling because it was an hour into getting there rather than 12 hours later, when I think I'd nearly hit hypothermia and had passed out. So this is me on the ice, you know, taking some pictures. I actually had the 400 on a monopod there. I actually realized soon after I was too high. Something with wildlife when you're shooting, whatever the subject is, and this can be in your back garden. I know a lot of these photos I'm showing you are from quite far-fetched destinations, but the same thing applies. So, you know, if you're wanting to shoot, you know, birds or foxes or owls or anything we have in England, you know, it's still really important to get low down on the ground. And in fact, looking back at here, if you look at the bottom right, I decided to lie on my front, and it's quite easy to use your arm to support your lens and use that as a tripod so you can get on eye level with wildlife. So a tip is to try and get on your eye level with the wildlife and keep as low as you can. It makes for a much more dynamic shot and powerful shot, in my opinion. Few images a little bit further afield. The top left was working in Alaska. A lot of the time I work from bush planes, so we land in places where, you know, I might be shooting the waterfall here. I think in this instant we're on our way to do some bear shooting down in Geographic Harbour. So I think we'd just taken maybe it was even a pee stop, I can't remember now. On the right, shooting some landscapes, which I showed you earlier, slightly lighter light there with my Canon 1DX Mark III and my 300 Prime. Very nice light setup there. Bottom left, that was in Patagonia. A lot of the places I access are through helicopter, so they land you in these vistas, which you know, a lot of the time I'm taking the pictures from the air where we have harnesses and we're strapped out of the helicopters, but sometimes we like to land and get some eye level shots too. And then bottom right, that's where we were just a second ago, down on the mainland of Antarctica shooting the penguin colonies. Here's some of my work, which has just been published. So you can, see sort of, how that translates from Antarctica to Geographic Harbour and bears. I think, if you are an enthusiast and you would like to get into being a professional photographer, or you maybe already are and get shots published and you want to push that further, I would just say really just get out there and do it, and have the confidence that you can get the shots. And then really it's about networking and contacting magazines or contacting your local newspapers and sharing those photos and being quite confident in that. And more times than not, that they will take your photos to get published. This was actually a shot from Wrangel Island. I mentioned before, up in the Russian Far East, or the Northeast Passage, sort of going Arctic Russia. Slightly different shot. I decided to shoot it wider. And it was kind of more to express the solitude that not only that these animals have, but also our sort of disconcern, or my disconcern on really the despair that these animals could be left in if we don't act now on trying to make changes in how we can support and protect our beautiful planet, really. And I think that's sort of where I'm going to be heading to more now, is really trying to use these trips and work out here to bring home those shots, to provide awareness. And there's so much beauty, and most of my filming and my photography is based around the beauty, because I think keeping it positive and really showcasing that is one of the best ways, not just for myself, but to share with others, to be mindful about protecting our planet. So we'll play a short video now of some polar bears, and enjoy. Over to you, Chris. Very beautiful. It's very humbling to be out in such remote places and to spend time with these creatures. And yeah, I hope we can keep protecting them and doing our best. Every small difference makes that difference. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for giving your time this evening. Again, if you want to ask any questions, please feel free to add some in the comments now. More than happy to answer any. If you would like to contact me later or anytime, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My website's on the screen now, and you can email me. And if you have any technical questions or would like to understand more about my kit that I use, I am a Canon Ambassador, and I've not just used Canon, in the last few years, but I have chosen to use Canon throughout my whole career. For me, it's been the best setup for me. It's provided me with the shots I needed and given me the support that I've needed, throughout surfing to working with bears in the Arctic. And it's I really have gained quite some knowledge with working with their gear. So hopefully I can, support anyone that has any of these questions in real life situations of being in these environments, to give that and to share that knowledge. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. And thank you once again. It's been a pleasure, and have a lovely evening. Bye, everyone.